Hello and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan and thanks for joining us for this Kickstarter preview for Micro Midgard from Prometheus Game Labs. First up, we must say that this is a pre-production copy that we've been provided to enable this preview and a subsequent playthrough that you can check out on the channel and in the links in the description below. Also, whilst this is a pre-production copy, we must say that pretty much everything is finalised for the campaign, but there might be some changes in that campaign, so stay up to date, again, with the links in the description below. In Micro Midgard, we're going to be playing champions of Midgard that are going to be trying to fulfill some prophecies before Ragnarok comes around and destroys some of the realms that we're going to see before us. It's a solo or a two-player game, and the copy that we've got in front of us is the Ragnarok edition. There's going to be a number of editions for the game, so we will see an envelope edition, which will be the whole game that fits in an envelope, so cheap on production, cheap on the postage, cheap on the storage, but it will be in a compact edition. We'll also then see the standard edition, which will come in a small box. And then we see this Ragnarok edition, which is going to have a big box for it. It's going to have an insert in it. Some of the components have changed. So you're going to see a little bit more different in that. Again, must emphasize that there may be things that change throughout that campaign. So stay up to date with that. Let's get down to see what we've got in front of us. As you see in front of us, we've got all the components laid out. We're going to talk through a little bit about the setup, but first of all, what I want to do is focus on the solo parts that you're going to see in this. So if you do want to play this on a solo, you can see the components for that. So it's the components that you can see for the solo edition of the game. We're going to be playing against Loki, and he's going to have a couple of tokens, specific board for himself, and a deck of cards that you're going to be able to use that will work through an automa for you to be able to compete against that. So if you want to be the solo, you're going to be using some of these components along with the main rules of the game, which we're going to go through in a second. So we're going to take a look at setup, and first off we're going to start with the realms board, and you'll note that in the Ragnarok edition that the realms are double-sided, which will enable for some variability during setup. We will also put the wolves in their starting position around the outside. Next up, taking a look at the prophecy board, we will randomise these tiles around the outside edge, and they will either be on a moon side or on a sun side, depending upon whether you put them at the top track or the bottom track, so increasing that variability for setup. We will also set up these 4 realm tiles randomly, which are, again, double-sided, so increasing that variability on setup, and we'll also randomise the order. These are going to indicate which realms we are going to start destroying as Ragnarok approaches. We're then going to take a look at the blessing boards that are around the table, 2 for the sun realm and 2 for the moon realm. And these will have cards inside them that will determine which orientation is set up based on the realms that have been selected in the prophecy board setup. So for here, we're going to have Hell's Blessing put in this card here, and that's going to give us a bit more variability to that starting setup that we've seen already in so many other areas. On 2 of the blessing boards, these are going to be craft blessings, and these are going to be randomized relics that we're going to be putting out. We currently have in this edition 3 for each level, and on all the relics they are either moon relics or sun relics, and again increasing that variability on setup. We're then going to place player tokens on each of the blessing boards at the bottom blessing, so in stage 1. We're also going to put a player marker for the victory points starting at 0, and then finally we're going to align these meeples based on the boards that we've picked up and their starting location. So Wayland in Alfheim, we're going to put Freya in Vanaheim, we're going to put Buri in Niflheim, and Hel in Helheim. So randomised out on the board. Again, these starting positions are going to be varied based on which setup you've got, so there's a lot of different changes that are going to happen in the beginning. We'll also then assign each player a colour, so we've got red and blue, so we're just going to put the blue player over here, red player over here. Then we're going to put all of our resources in a pool in the middle, and you'll notice we've got gold or mead, and you've either got 1 or 3 variations in each. Players can only ever hold 7 of each resource, so they can never hold too many, and that sort of gives you a little bit of a push-pull in regards to how far you go with certain resources and how much you can collect. Once we've decided the first player, so in this instance we're going to choose red being the first player, we then assign a resource to the blue player of their choosing, but in this instance I'm just going to randomly select gold. Now that we've selected our red player as our first player, a player's turn will go through 3 different stages. The first phase is going to be move. And in order to move, we will select one of the meeples that are on the realm board that doesn't already have a token on it, and we will then look to move that. Now, a meeple can move either clockwise, counterclockwise, or into the Midgard. The only exception for this is that when realms are destroyed, you can no longer get into and out of Midgard to that realm. You also cannot occupy the same spot as another meeple. So your choices to where you move are sometimes limited, but there's always something that you can do. This red player is then going to choose to take Hell and put Hell in Jotunheim. Pop the meeple along, then we put our token on it indicating that we've moved it. We then get, in the second phase, to take the action that's on the board. Now you'll note that each of these have slightly different actions that go around the outside edge, but the majority they're going to be fairly simple. Gold, you'll collect gold. Mead, you'll collect mead. And then you've got a craft, moon, and sun actions. Now, the craft action allows you to take a craft blessing action, which enables you to move up or take some of the actions on the blessing tracks. We'll get to those in a second. The moon and sun icons enable you to do the same, but on the sun or the moon blessing track. Also, you'll note that there's a little wolf icon inside the sun and the moon. And what that will do is that will then advance the relevant wolf. Okay, and then in stage 3 of the player's turn, should those wolves have crossed the relevant incorrect spaces, so the sun wolf moving into the moon space and the moon wolf moving into the sun space, we will then enact a stage of Ragnarok. But before we get to that, obviously we want to look back at these blessing boards. Now, these blessing boards can be triggered in a couple of different ways. So for each of the blessing icons that you pick up, so in Midgard for instance, you could choose which one you pick up, you can then perform a blessing action. Now, for the sun and the moon track, blessing action is either you can spend that action to move up a layer, or if you're already on a layer, you can then trigger the benefit that's there by moving your token back down to the first track. So for instance here, on a previous turn, for instance, we've moved up to this second layer. We can then choose to take 3 mead for a moon action and drop down. And you'll note there's some correlation into regards to what's producing you what. So mead is technically produced in the moon phase or on the moon boards, whereas gold is often produced on the sun boards. So you're going to be looking at which way around you're going to be pushing that, depending upon what resources you want to use, what resources you want to gain. The craft tracks, however, are slightly different. The first time that you approach a level and choose to enact that level, you get to take the relic card, the relic tile that's in front of it. Now these relic tiles will have different meanings. I'm going to pop that up there. And on them, typically they have a cost and then a benefit. So on a future turn, you can then use that tile to trigger that benefit. So on a future turn, if I got a craft blessing, instead of using it on one of the craft tracks, I can then instead use that craft blessing in order to trigger this relic tile, which will give me a gold and a mead. And that means I don't have to move my tokens. It doesn't mean that I have to trigger them. So there's a little bit different in how you take that. That player takes that over to their side and they're used for the remainder of the game. And you'll note that some of the prophecies will link to how many hammers you've got on them, whether you've got moon relics or sun relics. So it's relevant which one of these that you pick up and when you pick them up. You'll also note that once the relic's been taken, it does free up a different space. So there's still options once the relics have gone. So it's not just a one and done, you've got a few options once you've got those there. As I mentioned, once a player has taken their blessings, and they can take them in any order, or their benefits, they can take them in any order and they can trigger multiple ones, like we've seen here with the craft icon. There could be something that gives you a craft icon, so up here on the sun track, for instance, that will then enable you to use your relics, which you can only use once a turn, but there might be multiples that you can use. We then check for Ragnarok, and as we said earlier, that's triggered by when the wolves have crossed over to the opposite side of the board. And what we do there is then we come back to the prophecy board, which, as we've already set up, we've already got these prophecies that we're looking to trigger. Depending upon which wolf caused the prophecy's end or the end of the round to trigger, will determine which one of these score. So in this example, we can see here that the moon wolf has crossed the space. So it's actually going to be the moon wolf that triggers, the moon prophecy that triggers. So straight away, we discard the sun trigger, or sun prophecy. That's not going to matter. We're then looking at this moon prophecy. This moon prophecy is looking for the most gold and the most mead. Now, typically, we would have gone through a number of rounds in order to get that, but in this example, our blue player is the only person with a resource, so the blue player will win that prophecy or score that prophecy. They will therefore get the number of points that's linked to that prophecy. As you said in the original setup, it's 1 point for the first two, 2 points for third and fourth, and 3 points for the final one. Once you resolve the prophecy, we'll then look to see which realm is going to get destroyed. Now, for here, it's going to be Alfheim. So Alfheim is going to be destroyed, so we take out Alfheim and we discard the realm. You'll now note that it's slightly weaker than it once was. So here we would have got 2 gold. Even on the variable setup, it would have given us a craft blessing and a gold. It's now only going to provide us with 1 gold. We're also unable to connect back to Midgard, so it limits our movement options from Alfheim. We'll then take the realm token and we'll put it in that realm space. Then we reset our wolves to their relevant space. If, for instance, it was actually Muspelheim that had been the trigger, the wolf would have, some wolf would have actually started in Alfheim. But as it was just Alfheim, it starts in Muspelheim. What you may have already noticed is that when the wolf would then come to move to Alfheim, it skips Alfheim and goes to Asgard. This is going to both limit your options, limit the movement, and increase the speed at which future rounds are going to sort of progress and Ragnarok is approaching. Obviously, we've got 2 sun realms and 2 moon realms. So we've got to be very careful on how that's balanced, and depending on how that's balanced in the beginning of the game may really affect your playthrough as you do it. If players ever tie for a prophecy, then no player will get any points, and they'll have to look for scoring opportunities elsewhere as we approach the end of the game. And the game's going to end in one of 2 ways. Firstly, if we score the 5th prophecy, the person with the most points is then going to win. If there's a tie, the person with the most remaining resources will win. Alternatively, if any player ever gets 9 points, the game ends immediately and they're declared the winner. So where you get your points from is going to be really key. Are you going to get them from prophecies, from relic tiles that you're able to use, or from these blessings that are just going to be available to anybody, but who gets there first and who actually uses them to best benefit as Ragnarok approaches? Options becoming limited, movement becomes a little bit more restrictive. You're really going to have to think on your feet and work out strategies that are going to work for you. Are you going to block opponents? Are you going to move through and just try and force your strategy out just to get those extra few points? When there's not many points going around, it can be quite tight for your gameplay. If you like what you've seen here, check out the Kickstarter campaign in the link below. If you want to see a little bit more, check out our playthrough. If you like what we do, give us a like, give us a subscribe, check out the other videos on our channel, and we will catch you next time. Take care.